Tuesday afternoon, we held a press conference here. We reported a homicide on 21 East Walnut Street in Lancaster City. Today, we're holding this press conference to announce an arrest in the case. We've made an arrest of Damien Barnhill, who was the roommate of the deceased, who was Rouit Bahadur. This investigation unfolded very quickly and through the hard work of the District Attorney's Office, particularly Assistant District Attorney Chris Larson and Lancaster City Criminal Investigation Division. This investigation was headed up by Lieutenant Jared Berkeyheiser, and the case detective on this was Sergeant Nate Nickel. None of these cases are simple to resolve. It's almost like if you consider a jigsaw puzzle, there's a lot of pieces, but putting them all together and to make a case. And in this case, the detectives in the District Attorney's Office worked on this tirelessly since we received the call late that evening. Fortunately, the investigation led us in the right direction. We were able to determine that the deceased the murder weapon was a meat cleaver, and there were several lacerations to the left side of the face. And the investigation led us to Mr. Barnhill. He was arrested and brought in. He confessed to the crime. And I just want to thank all the hard work of both offices for bringing this case to quick resolution. And now the other process begins, and I'll turn it over to District Attorney Craig Stedman.
Thanks, Chief. I just want to echo the comments of the Chief. This is certainly a combined effort to solve this, working with First Assistant Chris Larson and Jared Berkeyheiser and entire CID. I know they worked around the clock on this, and we're completely dedicated to solving this crime. As the Chief said, these things don't fall into your lap. There's no video of it. We didn't have any reports of eyewitnesses or anything. These take place in secluded areas without witnesses, and you have to do a lot of hard work to solve them. There were a lot of steps that went along with this. I mean, in this particular case, the defendant, who's been charged with 1 count of criminal homicide, actually called 911 and feigned that he had just found the body. So we had to deal with that situation. He was not being truthful with the police up front, which of course adds a stumbling block to the investigators. In this particular case, I want to give credit to the forensic investigators, the crime scene guys who do that labor-intensive work that many others don't want to do, the meticulous work of going through the scene and looking for evidence. And in this case, they found through a chemical test some essentially a bloody footprint at the scene, which provided us with enough information to obtain the defendant's shoe, which we then looked at the picture of the shoe, looked at the scene, and we knew that we had essentially a match there. And if that's not done, and just to emphasize, when the police went to the naked eye, there was no footprint there. There wasn't anything that they saw, and any defendant, he would thought that there was nothing there, but there is leucocrystal violet, which is a chemical you can apply, and it draws up the hemoglobin and able to see it. So a lot of times those forensic guys don't get the credit that they deserve, and I want to make sure that they do in this particular case, and that became a critical piece of evidence that allowed us to move forward with this investigation and gave the leverage that we needed to ultimately to get the confession. Obviously, there was a lot more work to be done. This is just the beginning. He's charged. He is presumed innocent of the charge, and it's up to us to prove him guilty. I'm confident we'll do that as we work with the city police and my staff as well to make sure that justice is done in this case. His prelim will be scheduled. I don't have a date for that. Other than that, I don't think I have any statements. Chris, I don't know whether you have anything you wanted to add.
I believe that Chief Sadler and District Attorney Stedman have really covered everything that is critical in this case. I do want to, however, add that it was really a pleasure and an honor to work with the Lancaster City Bureau of Police, the Criminal Investigative Division specifically, to watch these guys work, to see the hours that they put into this, to see that they go on without sleep and missing and being unable to deal with their personal lives and their family matters that have to be picked up by other friends and family of theirs while they dedicate themselves to tracking down the perpetrator of this horrific, brutal crime. It really is just awe-inspiring to watch the way they do their work, and to actually see it all come together piece by piece is really an amazing thing. So it was an honor and a privilege to work with them. I am relieved that we do have this brutal murderer off the street. He is obviously presumed innocent of these charges. This process will continue on, and we will present evidence in court of everything that we have established over the past few days, some of which has not been included in this affidavit of probable cause, and other information which will be collected in the days and weeks to come. But again, it was an honor and a privilege to work along with them and to watch just the professionalism of the Lancaster City Bureau of Police.
So you have any questions?
Could you discuss the relationship between these two men and a possible motive?
Well, the Barnhill was the roommate of Mr. Bahadur, and apparently there was some sort of argument, and then it led to this attack.
We wouldn't really want to speculate on. We didn't put anything in the affidavit. We're restricted as to what we can say, to what's public information, and some of that will come out at a later time.
I didn't know, like when he confessed, if he said why. You don't
Yeah, I mean, even if he did, if we don't put it in the affidavit, then we're restricted ethically from commenting on that. Obviously, there has to be a pretty substantial reason for somebody to take a meat cleaver to somebody's head and face repeatedly. I mean, it is absolutely a brutal crime. Pictures are difficult to look at, and you know, we were sitting here doing a press conference about something, what we forget. Somebody lost their life. It was taken from him unrighteously, criminally, and we've got to make sure that we follow through, and he can't ever do this to anybody else again, and he suffers the consequences for his decision.
Have you found the meat cleaver?
We have not. We're going to continue to look for that. We have information that we want to follow up with on that, and hopefully we'll be able to find that.
How long had they been roommates? Can you tell us how
I don't know
long?
the answer to that question.
No, we know that they were roommates.
Was there an attempt by the suspect to clean up the scene? I know you said that to the naked eye you couldn't see that footprint, so.
Yeah, absolutely there was, and that led us to believe, even before we had it solved, that this was somebody that was familiar with that apartment as well as the defendant. I mean, a random killer typically does not take time to clean up the scene. You do the homicide and you get out. There were substantial efforts to clean up, and that's another thing that came up with the Luco Crystal Violet. You could actually see some of the wiping patterns from a sponge or a paper towel or something like that. So clearly he took his time afterwards so he could pass himself off as having done nothing, and again, you know, hours later called 911 and pretended to be surprised by it. So
when do you believe the crime occurred?
would have been late afternoon, between I believe 4:30 and 6:30 is the time frame.
And then he called after midnight?
Yeah, approximately.
It's 12:11.
Do you believe he left the apartment, discarded the meat cleaver, came back, cleaned up? Is that?
Yeah, there were efforts not only to clean up, but to discard some of the clothing and anything that would have had blood. I mean, fortunately for us, he kept his shoes, and so we'll follow through with that. And again, that's one of the things. Again, we have work to do.
Right.
Finding that.
Recover any of his bloody clothing?
I don't have a comment on that yet.
And you say he did confess?
Yes. Yeah.
But is he being not totally cooperative in that?
Well, I don't know how that's not for me to use that terminology of cooperative. He's admitted to killing. We had substantial evidence independent of his confession that he was responsible for this. I mentioned the shoes, mentioned the cleanup. This wasn't a break-in. There was no forced entry. There was nothing. His wallet was there. The money wasn't taken, so he didn't have a robbery. you know, there were a small number of suspects here, so he was obviously one of them, and the cooperativeness, I mean, I leave that for somebody else to decide the label. He's admitted to responsibility for a criminal homicide, and it's up to us to prove it to a jury.
Do you know much about the victim at all?
I don't.
No, it's just, he was 59 years old. He was going to turn 60, I believe, this weekend. And, you know, it's a small consolation to the victim's family, but at least we can do this much and apprehend somebody. Apparently they were planning a celebration for his birthday. So if you think of how horrible that is, the fact that this man was an average citizen working, making a living like everybody else, and had his life taken away from him. So it's a small consolation to the family, but at least they know that his killer is not out there walking around.
He actually worked at the Marriott. He was undergoing the naturalization process. He has friends and family in the area, and you know, from our reports, well liked.
Do you know what capacity he worked at Marriott?
Yeah.
He was part of the kitchen staff. And I believe he immigrated from Guyana about 13 years ago.
Do you believe drugs or alcohol was involved prior to the crime?
I'll no comment on that. Yeah, thanks.
And when was the suspect taken into custody?
That was earlier today, late last night.
Late last night? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if you say early morning.
Lieutenant Berkeheiser could give. Probably
Yeah, he was taken into custody without incident right around, I'd say, the midnight time frame.
Okay. Was he in the apartment?
No, he was taken into custody on the, I'm trying to think of the cross streets there. It was in the northwest part of the city.
No, he once that was discovered, that was sealed. The apartment, nobody had access to that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Okay.
How important was the forensics team in helping solve this case?
Well, like every homicide investigation, there's, when I say a team effort, it really involves the old-fashioned police work, meaning going out and doing neighborhood surveys, reviewing the evidence that's collected, and then what enhances the investigation clearly is the forensic capabilities that we have nowadays. But if you were only relying on one aspect of investigation, you really wouldn't solve many crimes. In this case, like the district attorney described in detail, a key piece of forensic evidence helped us tremendously. That doesn't always happen. But besides that, even without that, the fact that the detectives, the district attorney's office worked through the night and now we're into the third, fourth day of this investigation, all of that added up usually leads to often to a quick apprehension. Unfortunately, every homicide is not the same. There are some cases where almost no forensic evidence is available, no witness, little chance of getting any bear any fruit from neighborhood interviews, and that unfortunately that happens sometimes. In this case, I mean, if you could pick an ideal case, we wish we could solve every homicide as quickly as this one, and that often happens. The last homicide in the city was solved within a couple of minutes. The doer was captured at the scene right down the street here. So, you know, the fact that we have those capabilities is a big advantage to police work. But, and I say it on every investigation, nothing will ever replace hard-working detectives and prosecutors.
Were you aided by neighbors, acquaintances? I mean, how helpful was that in this investigation? Sometimes that's an issue. Makes it difficult.
Sometimes it is an issue. Sometimes it's an issue just because nobody legitimately has information for us.
Right.
Some cases, people withhold that information. When we were doing when our detectives were out there surveying a neighborhood and the building that the gentleman lived in, people were willing to talk to us, but they just really didn't have a lot of information. So it wasn't that they didn't want to cooperate. And homicide like this happens literally behind closed doors, as opposed to something that might occur out on the street where maybe your surveillance camera captures it or several witnesses, even if it's anonymous, somebody gives us information. But again, this case clearly, if all the pieces of the puzzle literally came together. All right, thank you, folks.